Hello there everyone, welcome to another video on the channel and welcome to what I guess is another Gran Turismo 7 opinion piece. In this video we're going to take a look at Daily Race C issues and where PD continued to go wrong with the settings to not deliver the best possible race that the game is capable of. Now, I had already made this video, it was already all edited, all with the commentary on top of it by Sunday night, even before this week's Daily Race C at Autopolis had went live. Now, we knew it was Autopolis, we knew it was a road car, we knew it was sport soft tyres. However, if ever a race kind of emphasises or kind of helps to make the point that I'm going to try and make in this video, then that race is there. So I've decided to redo the commentary on this, feature that race in this one, but we're also going to feature last week's Daily Race C with Group 4 at Grand Valley Highway 1, and also the Daily Race C before that, which was Group 3 cars at Daytona. Now, as the game approaches its 2-year anniversary, I think it's fair to say that PD have no plans to shake up the way sport mode works. It's going to continue to be Daily Race A, B and C, same as what we had back in GT Sport, same as what we've had for the entirety of GT7. Now, we've discussed many times on this channel, and it's been discussed many times on other channels how we'd like to have some additional daily races and some of the things that they could do to just make sport mode more interesting. But I think the stall has been set. I think this is the way it's going to continue until whatever the next game happens to be, whether that's Gran Turismo 8 or GT Sport 2. GT Sport 2 PD, if you're listening. Now, I would love to be wrong about what I've just said there, and that PD have actually got plans for a Sport Mode 2.0 on the horizon that brings maybe not a revolution to sport mode, but at the very least an evolution. But the pessimistic side of me just thinks it's not going to happen. I think we're stuck with Daily Race A, B and C in the same format, or a very similar format to what we have now. Now, that would be absolutely fine if PD just didn't keep making the same mistakes with the daily races. Now, we're going to focus on Daily Race C. So, for example, this week's Daily Race C, the GR86 at Autopolis, amongst its other problems, it is incredibly short. It's only 14 minutes long. It should be 20 minutes long. Last week we had the fuel saver, where we've done those kind of settings 5 or 6 times. Even though you've got the medium tyres, there is just no alternative strategy, so it always descends into a no-stop on the hard tyres, and only a few cars become available. You had the additional problem there with the Mazda and the Ferrari, which were the two competitive cars, having very different characteristics in the way they completed the lap, and that could lead to some very frustrating racing. And then the week before that, we had the Group 3 race at Daytona. Now, that was fairly well received, and it's actually going to be the focus of this video here, as we look at ways in which that race could have been improved. But the problem with the mistakes that PD keep making here is that very quickly into the week, Daily Race C in particular can become very stale. There's often no real strategy. It becomes a 1 or 2 car make. We're always driving in the same lighting conditions, same weather conditions, same time of day conditions. It becomes very much like Groundhog Day. There's very little to learn after a couple of days, and you can't jump into a different car very often because it just won't be competitive. And the desire to run the race, certainly for me, can often be gone come Thursday, let alone the weekend. But the good news is it doesn't have to be that way. The bad news is that PD, as we said, continue to keep making the same mistakes. So what we're going to do in the next part of the video is we're going to take the Group 3 race from Daytona from a couple of weeks ago, a well-received race as I said, and we're going to look at ways in which we could have changed that to give that race the longevity, to give it that kind of dynamic element, and to keep the player base engaged throughout the week. So in the first column there, you've got Polyphony digital settings for that race a couple of weeks ago. On the second column, you've got my settings, what I'm going to change, and in the third column, the effect that the changes I make are going to have on this race. So let's start off with the car category. Obviously PD used Group 3, they made every single car available. The problem with that is that the nature of Daytona is if you don't have top end, the car is not competitive. So it was basically the Ford GT and the Peugeot VGT, with maybe the Supra if you're a slightly lower lobbies, were about the only cars that were competitive, because they're the only cars that were getting over 170 miles an hour. So yeah, within a couple of days you basically had 48 cars to choose from, but you could only really choose 2 of them if you wanted to have a competitive race. For me, I would kind of then just limit the selection of cars. I've always said this is one of the biggest things they should be doing in these daily races, so you don't have cars with very different characteristics matching up against each other like the Ferrari and the Mazda from Grand Valley Highway 1. So for example, let's just make it the Group 3 MR cars, but let's drop the Peugeot VGT as an MR, and possibly the Alfa Romeo, because I think it's got pretty high top end. That would kind of leave like your Ferrari, your Lamborghini, McLaren, your RS01, the Ford GT from 2018, the Porsche, etc. I think all of them have got top ends within about 1 or 2 miles an hour of each other. They're all MR cars as well, so they've got very similar characteristics, and instantly you just got much more usable cars within the race, which is straight away a win. Next up, we've got number of laps. This is an area where PD continue to go wrong as well. At Daytona they had 10 laps, it made it about a 17.5 minute race. We'll up that to 11, you could go as far as 12, but you should always kind of aiming to get around about 20 minutes, just over, whatever number of laps it takes to take the race, just over 20 minutes, that's what you make the race. But yeah, look at this week's race with the GR86 at Autopolis, 14 minutes. How did they manage to get that one so wrong? I'm not sure. But a longer race, the effect on the race will just open up your strategy options. In terms of tyres, PD were on the mediums, we'll keep it on the mediums as well. We've discussed the tyres, particularly multi-tyre compound races where generally the harder compound is next to useless because of the way the tyre wear model works. The best kind of strategy races you get in terms of tyres is actually when you just have one compound at the moment. Tyre wear times 4 for PD, we'll up that to times 5. The reason for that is just to actually bring the tyre wear into that range where an actual fresh set of tyres, if you change them at the pit stop, would actually have an advantage over the worn tyres. Even though it would take around about 5 seconds to change the tyres, it would just be something, another element to the strategy for you to consider. In terms of fuel, we're at times 4 default 100% for PD settings. I'm going to up that to times 5 and maybe just start on 90%. Now this is just something you would tinker about with just to make sure you get it spot on, but literally I'm just going to use the fuel consumption to make the no stop impossible. So really what I'm looking to get is if you drive one of the cars at full throttle, you're only getting about 7 or 8 laps. I'm trying to save 3 laps worth of fuel around Daytona. It would be so slow it would make the no stop pretty much impossible. In terms of mandatory rules, we had a mandatory pit stop for PD, but you didn't have to change the tyres, so it was useful for kind of giving a little bit of strategy. In my settings, we're not going to have any mandatory rules. The settings alone will force that pit stop. Time of day and weather, we'll look at these ones in conjunction. PD have this awful habit of just making it the default kind of time of day and then using one of the first 3 weather settings. Everything's static. It means every time you jump into the race, whether you do it 1 time, 10 times or 100 times, you're pretty much looking at the same lighting conditions and scenery. Why not just make both of these random? And there's 2 big reasons why this would add such a big dynamic and change to the race. Now the first up is just the visual changes that having different times of day and weather at random would bring. So sometimes you'd be driving at night, sometimes it'd be during the day, sometimes it'd be early in the morning, sometimes it'd be hazy, cloudy, bright sunshine. You know, it would just kind of, every time you jumped in, it would just look a little bit different. That alone is worth its weight in gold to just give you that little bit of variety. But even more than that, the kind of changes to the weather would bring temperature changes to the track. It would also bring different wind directions. So have a subtle impact on the way the slipstream works, a subtle impact on how fuel consumption works, and also your tyre wear. So for example, you could have one race where you're in the afternoon, it's bright sunshine, it's really hot, so the tyres are wearing out really quickly. So you're kind of thinking to yourself, okay, I'm going to change the tyres on the pit stop. The next race, it could be at night time, cooler temperatures, and the tyres last about 25% longer. So now you're thinking, okay, now I'm going to try and do the no tyre change strategy, maybe try and save a bit of fuel, make that pit stop as short as possible. So yeah, the dynamic element that just kind of having different times of day and weather would bring to the race just cannot be overstated. In terms of damage, slipstream and BOP, we're just going to keep that the same as what Polyphony have got, so light. But no, we could go heavy to try and kind of, you know, make drivers a little bit more careful, but I think in a 20-minute race you don't really want your race ruined at turn 1, so I think we'll just keep it on light. But that's definitely one to consider. In terms of refuel rate, I would maybe lower it down to 8 from PD's 10, and that would just reward any kind of fuel saving that you would make during the race as well. And for the start, PD had a rolling start. I think we'll keep the rolling start. A grid start is good, but maybe just tighten that rolling start up to have a more exciting first lap. You know, we can't be trusted in these fast cars and a grid start when everybody's too close together into turn 1. So that's the changes that I would make to that race to just make it a much better experience. There'd be much more reasons to race, there'd be much more cars to race, there'd be so many different strategy options. You just have that visual change as well from the different time of day and weather, the little subtle changes that would bring in to the strategy as well. And I can just see people being a lot more engaged in this kind of race because there's just so much more to it, there's so much more reason to race. And if you give your player base more reasons to race, they're going to race more, they're going to race for longer, and that's just good business sense at the end of the day. Surely the whole idea is to get your player base out racing, get them racing for longer, get them racing more often. So YPD continue to do these uninspired races and completely underutilising the potential of their product for the daily races. I just don't know why. It baffles me so much. I'm a very logical person, and when something is getting done so illogically, it baffles me, confuses me so much. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments of what the changes I've made to this race here. I know this race was well received and I enjoyed it myself, but I just think it could be so much better with the settings and the changes that I have made to it here. And I'll finish the video off with a little story for you. I actually managed to find a way to contact Polyphony Digital directly, and so I have actually written to them and offered them my services free of charge, purely out the love of the game, to help them create better daily races. Now, I am not delusional. I think there's probably more chance of me becoming the manufacturers and nations champion at this year's World Tour than there is of PD acknowledging my offer, let alone accepting it. But you know what, I had to try. I love the game that much. I just want things to be better. I know they can be better. There's no rocket science here. Everything we've suggested is part of the game, but stranger things have happened, folks. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Goodbye now.